On December 9th, 2019, Washington Post reporter Craig Whitlock published an article titled At War with the Truth. The article was the result of a Freedom of Information Act request for documents pertaining to the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, more commonly known as the SIGAR. Within those documents were hundreds of interviews with former theater commanders, advisors, and policymakers that indicated the shared belief that the war in Afghanistan was unwinnable and had been unwinnable for almost a decade. Despite that, these same individuals continuously lied to the American people and our federal legislators, claiming the war was an ongoing success and extended a failing mission that has not only made Afghanistan more volatile, but has not made America any safer. Today, we're going to discuss some of those lies and other broken promises and the role they played in America's failure in Afghanistan. Welcome to the Boardwalk.
Welcome to this week's recording of the Boardwalk. Today we have actually a special guest, Mick Lopez. Mick was with us while we were all contracting together or mercenarying together, depending on how you view it. And Mick joins us here. He was not a contractor. He was in the National Guard at the time. National Guard, right, Mick? Or the reserves? Yeah. Okay, National Guard, yeah. And one of the competent National Guardsmen that worked with us. So Mick, take it away. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Kyle. As I recall correctly, I was actually everyone's supervisor. No, it was a good time. We were analysts side by side, working in the trenches of the Cube farm, inside the skiff. Later on, though, after my National Guard tour was up, I quickly returned as a contractor. So right there with you all the way.
Sounds like Mick knows the value of the dollar. Goes a lot further if you're wearing khakis.
Khakis and a Hawaiian shirt, right? Isn't that the uniform? Oh. Remember Teal Team 6 when we all had the teal colored Columbia shirts?
We had Teal Team 6. That was Tuesdays, right? And then we did like Hawaiian shirt Mondays.
Yeah. We had quite the collection.
Back when we were winning.
I was really sad I couldn't really just wear my Hawaiian shirt around outside, lest I'd be confused for a Proud Boy or the other group. So looking forward for a few years for that fashion to come back and sell.
Yeah, did the Proud Boys steal the Hawaiian shirt from the mercenary crew? I don't like that.
From the Kipsy?
From the Kipsy. I mean, well, we weren't the first mercs.
Andrew Prentice told them about it.
Yeah.
I guess you'd have to put
if there's a Proud Boy.
I guess we were technically doing it when it was cool. So we're like anti-hipsters that way.
Oh, it was.
That's a good point.
It was very cool. I saw a guy. I went to Defense Language Institute. I went when I was there in the Army, and I was contracting, and I think I had my Hawaiian shirt on. He saw me walking around. He goes, "Kyle," it's like, "You joined Special Forces, dude?" I go, "No, I'm just a slave to the almighty dollar working over here." No, that'd be cool though, but unfortunately. No. But today's episode's about promises, right?
something about promises and whether they were kept or not. And I don't know. I was going through some of the promises that Obama made, and I feel like since last week we kind of talked a little shit about Donald Trump. I guess this week we get to talk shit about Barack Obama, because who wasn't a war criminal during the war in Afghanistan? The jury's still out. Sitting here going through the PolitiFact Obama Afghanistan promises, and like the first one says that he kept his promise to withhold aid to Pakistan unless they were more stringent in their counterterrorism operations. And it was dated like October 2009, and they never updated it.
Yeah, that's not a good one you want to update. That would be, what's the metrics by which you determine Pakistan wasn't aiding terrorism in Afghanistan?
That's a great question, and I'll let you know when they publish those metrics.
Yeah.
Imagine giving aid to a nuclear country, giving aid, period. But Jesus, they can drop bombs. Come on.
I mean, ask Israel.
Well, they got their own problems right now.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah, They're one really bad day away from starting a whole new form of anime.
Oh my God, yeah. Is that the ingredient to coming up with your own unique art style? I don't know. But guys, yeah, we all served. I think all of my military and mercenary service was under Obama. I got out of the whole damn thing just before Trump came into office. I think that was like one of the last things we did was watch Trump get elected.
I was in AIT out in Arizona when President Obama was elected, and yeah, we were there when President Trump was elected, which led to that shitty cake.
So Stu and Mick, I think you were all in. I mean, Mick, were you still in the Army when, or the National Guard when Trump was president, or did you get out before that?
First of all, Kyle, it's still the Army, so go ahead and jot that down in your book.
So go ahead and drop that down. Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
In a completely, with the exception of the end of that deployment where you guys shelled out money for a cake, all the remaining few years I spent in the National Guard was in a drill status. So,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, I mean, I did get to witness a lot of Donald Trump and the Army as a contractor, but I have some stories about that. But I think we were talking about President Obama.
Yeah. Right, and we're all basically pawns, right? We're all basically pawns of Obama's State Department, Obama era foreign policy, and we saw how absolutely awful. I mean, if you thought George W. Bush was bad, I mean, the fact that we extended that another 8 years after George W. Bush left. I mean, did Obama? Do you have that up, Zach? Could you ever say that Obama said we'd get out of Afghanistan during his term?
Yeah, there was based on the video, it looks like a State of the Union, and maybe I should have been more prepared and researched it and pulled up the exact date. But my mom's in town, and we were at the bar, so I got here a little close to the deadline to hit the record button. But I remember it's a distinctive audio where he says, "We will be out of Afghanistan. The war in Afghanistan will end next year." Which, if anybody has ever fought in a war, that's not how wars work. You don't just decide, okay, war's over, like unless you're practicing Pashtunwali, and that takes both sides to agree. So this whole idea, and President Obama said it like every fucking year that he was president. We're going to be out next year. We're going to be out next year. We're going to be out next year. I wish I spoke as well as him because I would be held to no standards.
Yeah, I mean, very eloquent. But do you think the absolute disaster that was the rise of ISIS, which we also funded? It's weird to call that a disaster when our money went exactly right to them. Like, do you think that collapse or that power vacuum in Iraq basically said, we're not doing this in Iraq. We can't do this twice in a row? Or do you think that's what kicked it down the road to the next administration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they said we can't risk another caliphate. One's too many.
One caliphate too many. We have one caliph too many right now, boys.
Yeah, I know you guys in previous episodes talked a lot about prevalence of Al-Qaeda and its remnants, but I got the unfortunate pleasure to witness the kind of semi-expansion of ISIS-K in Afghanistan, and then watching the Taliban go red on red against ISIS-K. That was really interesting to watch. But yeah, I think enough people saw that and were like, wow, we probably shouldn't hit that button again and maybe think this next one out.
Yeah, but we've given it plenty of time. But I think that problem's still there. There's still that power vacuum that will be filled with civil war. So, and probably a Taliban victory at the end of the day. We talked about that, I think, in the last episode.
You talked about it in probably the first 4 episodes. Yeah, no, to your point. Yeah, to your point. There's now, I think that tolerance for this ongoing conflict is just built, or it's completely diminished. And now, finally, someone's saying, well, the lesser of the two evils is, maybe more peace of mind at home versus the stability of a country on the other side of the planet.
Unless you're all the Republicans who all of a sudden care about women's rights in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think it
They
seems
gotta
like
start
whether we're going
somewhere.
to pull out of Afghanistan. It seems like whether we're going to pull out or not is just kind of that's a purely political issue based on whichever side's in power. Because I mean, Trump obviously for 8 years is like, or for 8 years. What did my timeline skip again or something?
Is this the Q episode?
Am I in the Barons? Am I in the Berenstain Bears timeline or the Berenstain Bears timeline? But no, like his 4 years.
2020 was a son of a bitch, man. I get it.
But I mean, Trump talks about that all the time. You know, he was talking about we're going to leave Afghanistan, we're going to leave it. So it's just weird that Biden gets in. And you sent me that text message not text message, but the Twitter quote from President Obama, who agrees, of course, now with Joe Biden's decision to vacate Afghanistan.
Oh yeah, I just pulled it up because it's important. So after nearly 2 decades in Afghanistan, it's time to recognize that we have accomplished all that we can militarily. This is me coming off script. We accomplished nothing militarily.
The date never changed.
And bring our remaining troops home. I support POTUS, bold leadership in building our nation at home and restoring our standing around the world. Apparently, Donald Trump was not working on this withdrawal. It was all Joe Biden in 2 months.
Yeah, it's amazing how quick that tune changed, because when Trump was talking about it, it's like, we can't just leave Afghanistan with no plan. But now it's like, we applaud the decision to leave Afghanistan with no plan.
Right. But the reason I bring that up, well, we have talked about it at length for years now. But the reason it's brought up now is that the person who wrote that tweet is acting as if he had no authority to make those same decisions. The president of the United States is the only person who can say, "Yep, war's over, we're going home." Like I know he said that at his State of the Unions, and he said it at West Point, and he said it everywhere he went, and it never happened. But he's the one person who could say, "Okay, this is a failed effort. It's time to bring the troops home," and he never did. We're going to kind of base most of this episode on just the nonsense, not so much around President Obama, but his advisors and the theater commanders, and what was revealed in the Afghanistan papers and all the cigars, and why this war just continued to exist, which benefited nobody unless you worked for Raytheon or Lockheed or any other military industrial complex organization, which
we did.
4 of us did.
Or khaki, or khaki, or
Hey! I worked for a
BAE,
small
yeah,
business,
for sure.
minority disabled veteran-owned company. Okay.
Right. Was it a woman-owned? Was it a women disabled minority veteran at small-owned business that got a contract to go merc in Afghanistan?
Pretty sure it's actually a wealthy white guy that snuck in somehow, but it was a small company.
Yeah, you guys can have one of these.
For those not in the contracting know, it is very beneficial for a company to check certain boxes when getting contracts from the United States government. So definitely veteran owned is a big one, but disabled, person of color, female. It's kind of messed up to put the disabled and female in the same category like that, but it's all about the boxes with the government.
To get into current events for just a second, sorry, my wife gets mad when I say I seen. I saw that President went to Tulsa the other day to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Greenwood massacres, and he had spoken about trying to right some wrongs and make life a little more equitable for African Americans in America. Well, all he has to do is look at how they issue contracts to military defense contractors, and they'll be good to go, because however many boxes you can check, you're going to get a shitload of money. Whether you produce or not is irrelevant.
Right, and that's another good point. And you talked about in the intro, you talked about the Afghanistan papers, and we should mention, well, you did in the intro. It basically this report published based on Freedom of Information Act request that basically said, everyone knew it was unwinnable. Well, we knew that, and the Afghanistan papers is just one of the many things in my life which vindicates some of the rambling that I've done, drunk at bars and with my friends before, because they're like, "Oh, why do you talk so bad about the Afghan war?" I'm telling you, dude, it's unwinnable. Like, everybody's decided it's unwinnable. They're just feeding you bullshit. And it turns out that's 100% the absolute case. That's exactly what's been happening, and way longer than I thought. Actually, I didn't realize like from the beginning it's been basically just feeding Congress BS to keep us there.
The papers went back to like 2004.
I think the complexity of a pullout for a while, and this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, just like really didn't cross the threshold for acceptable. What are the pros versus the cons? Well, the pros are looking really good now, and the cons are not quite as severe as they used to look, because it's become normalized that the Taliban is controlling the majority of the country. It's acceptable. Well, it's easier to swallow that the Afghan National Army is near completely incompetent. Before that was just something we couldn't fathom. I mean, we're the U.S. We're back-to-back World War champs. We've never lost a war. The Vietnam conflict was a conflict. We just don't lose like that. So it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe Jerry Jones finally saying, maybe my team actually sucks this year, and just living with it.
Keep it down, bud.
Do you think that? I mean, that's an interesting point that I haven't thought. Is that it just got so bad and it went on for so long, and every year just got worse and worse. And they were like, well, the Taliban control the entire country anyway, so if we leave, they'll just take it. Like, we knew that years ago, but now it just seems like this. It seems true. It just seems harder.
Well, the important thing for every, I mean, we said it when we were talking about like OER bullets for officers. Like the important thing is that you're not the guy that lost the war. Like nothing will kill your career worse than being the one that presided over the defeat there. So you gotta leave it slightly better than it was before, even though it's not, and just call it a day. So I think that heavily contributed to the situation we're in, and also presidents being lying assholes, but they all are.
Name a politician that tells the truth, and I'll tell you somebody that's not a politician.
So the question is, like, who has the OER bullet that they officially lost the Afghan war? Who gets that bullet now?
Noreen McDonald.
Noreen McDonald. It's just all a setup. It's just General Nicholson's wife that they've been ferrying around all those years.
I think it's just going to go from like the OER write-ups are going to be like maintain security, and there's going to be no transition period between that and oversaw retrograde.
Yeah.
Oversaw retrograde.
Did not lose provincial capital of Panjshir.
Yeah, held it to the end. Held it to the bitter
They'll
end.
find a way to blame McChrystal for it somehow. Those sons of bitches. They'll find a way.
Let's just bring Flynn in. You know what? We'll pin this whole thing on Flynn.
I think one of the first things I remember about Mike Flynn when he became, I think he's like the director of the DIA or some shit like that. He starts talking about the conflict in Iraq, and he comes out and says, like, Sunni Shia split has nothing to do with what's going on. It's like, are you? He's like the senior officer of the entire intelligence field, and that's his assessment. Is that these two sides have been trying to kill each other for like 1,300 years because of a whole matter of who's the next person in line. It has nothing to do with that.
Are you suggesting that these people are incompetent, or are you suggesting that the military leaders that we trust to protect this nation may not exactly be the smartest people when it comes to certain things?
I never questioned their intellect. It's very much, it's similar to when you watch politicians debate, like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, right? Where Kamala Harris calls out Joe Biden about the whole busing legislation back in the 70s. And then she turns around and accepts his nomination as vice president, right? It's like, what's true, what's not true, but it's about playing the game. I don't think any of these commanders are dumb. Well, most of the commanders aren't dumb.
There are some.
There are some. But they all know that they can't tell you just how bad it is. Like we were talking about in the first episode when, our boss, we tell him, hey, tell General Milley the truth, that it's not looking good. And he says, oh, they're staring defeat in the face. Like, that's not true, sir.
Not true.
You're just perpetuating a lie.
Yeah.
I'd like to reference the Flag Officers for America letter that came to news recently, in which 124 former U.S. flag officers wrote a letter denouncing the election of Joe Biden, claiming that Donald Trump was the true elect president of the United States of America. According to some sources on the letter, most of them were Vietnam era or the Cold War. I mean, you can call it that.
Cold War veterans.
They
Hey,
didn't sleep in a chew.
they're boomers, man. They're boomers. Like they are. They're boomers that at one point had a star on their chest or on their shoulder, but they're still boomers, man. And they're just as prone to it.
So Jack Nicholson, do you bring that up? Jack Nicklaus, one of the greatest golfers of all time. I don't know why I said Nicholson. Jack Nicklaus. I'm on my 5th beer. Jack Nicklaus, he made a little like short 30-second video or tweet or something for Donald Trump during the election, and the whole thing was like, we gotta stop socialism and communism, and that's like all the people that signed that letter. That's their generation, right? It's all about stopping socialism and communism. So of course they're going to think, oh, the guy with the R in parentheses, he's going to solve it. Well, no, he's just extended the war even longer, and apparently tried to get us out of Afghanistan in 2 weeks, which is really that's some fucking goals right there. We could get everybody out in 2 weeks.
I mean, the planes don't fly at that.
There's that scene in Cobra Kai where Johnny's trying to film a commercial for his dojo, and at the end of it, he says, "Okay, now put it on the internet." Like that's the kind of person I picture like signing these petitions.
The guy I didn't win. Clearly, there was fraud, and we need to stay in Afghanistan.
I had my grandson set up my computer the other day. I know what hacking is.
That's a good point, though, Mick, about that. I mean, you're dealing with people at the end of the day, and people are just as susceptible to all the social media propaganda and stuff as anybody else. So, and boomers especially, for whatever reason, seem to just eat it up. But why do you think that we've been there so long? Like, I mean, I try to get back to the Afghan topic. I want to talk about maybe that flag officer to CEO or board position pipeline that seems to perpetuate endless war. Unless you guys got something else you guys want to talk about as far as why we've been there so long.
Well, I had some observations, slight deviation about the Axios article that Zach sent out as a pre-listen for this episode, in which the reporter is referencing a couple situations where Donald Trump was attempting to facilitate a withdrawal with very few certain terms and a very quick timeline, kind of falling apart. So one of the things they talked about was presidential tweets. So in this article, basically Donald Trump has a staffer, a very junior level staffer, run over to the chairmen of the Joint Chiefs and deliver what sounded like a letter written crayon saying the president wants us out of Afghanistan in a very short time. And then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs had to sit down with the president and convince him that this was a horrible idea with the timeline proposed there. But so being on the other side of that, it's a contractor attached to some pretty high echelons within the theater. At the division level, for I guess U.S. Forces Afghanistan, I would witness Donald Trump tweet something, and during the next staff sync, the commanding general saying, "Hey, look, just because the president tweets something doesn't mean we're doing it. These things have a process. Orders come down. They're developed. We plan. We execute. We evaluate. So no one worry about it." In unrelated news, I need all the staff primaries for the next 4 hours in this room. All right. Meeting adjourned. So really the tweets had a lot of sway. So I think maybe Donald Trump kind of pushing the topic in unorthodox manners, at least for that office, maybe did sway a lot of the public opinion. Whether you like the guy or not, he was putting his voice out there, and a lot of people absorbed what he was thinking.
he did change public opinion, but he never changed his stance on we need to leave Afghanistan, which is more than we can say about his predecessors, right? You look at Barack Obama's one of his campaign promises in 2008 was about winding this war down. A couple years later, he announces, I believe, at West Point that we're going to do the surge in Afghanistan like we did the surge in Iraq. And I know, Mick, you were in Iraq when I was in Iraq. I don't know if the surge actually worked. We always say that the surge worked because Americans stopped dying. That's great. I'm not going to disagree with that element of the surge. But wasn't the whole point of that surge in Iraq to like get some actual long-term stability in the country? That didn't happen. Well, let's do the same thing in Afghanistan, and it didn't happen again.
You and I were both there post-surge. And for all the listeners, Zach and I were located in separate command areas. Zach was in Baghdad. I was in a city called Basra. But we had some friends some mutual friends that we met during the deployment. But after the surge, the U.S. forces in Iraq created what were called buys and assist brigades. And you took basically an infantry combat brigade. Yep. Crap, I'm pulling a blank. ICBT. Yeah. Okay. So you pull an infantry brigade. Tell them, hey, go ahead and train the local force on how to defeat, the counterinsurgency or how to win a counterinsurgency war. One brigade per section. Good luck, guys. You got it. And it failed miserably. But then looking at Afghanistan, by the time I got to Afghanistan, I think the majority of the SFAT fad had pretty much died out and was moving to the SFAB, which was more of the force-heavy. It was more senior than the traditional advise and assist brigade, in which you had, mid-level NCOs, junior officers, senior officers meeting with their Afghan staff counterparts and training them up on how to fight a war. I think it was a better thought out concept, but it still failed miserably. I personally witnessed a young PFC who had gotten assigned to the SFAB for his first assignment out of AIT, which is his training school. So he's about a 19-year-old kid, and he gets deployed, and they tell him, hey, you're advising the S2, which is the intelligence officer of an Afghan National Army brigade in Kapisa province.
That's my baby.
So for those who don't know, Kapisa is a crazy place. The French went there at the beginning of the war, got slaughtered, said, peace, thanks guys, this wasn't fun. The U.S. tried to go in there, got slaughtered. Special forces tried to go in there. As I heard it said, the Taliban were moving and communicating on our asses. Kapisa is a rough place, real deep Taliban stronghold. A lot of suicide bombers and bad stuff going through that area. So here we are sending young PFC Jackson to go advise an Afghan military intelligence officer on how to solve that situation. So that is kind of, for me, the epitome of the SFAB concept and the advise and assist brigade.
It's a pretty cool job, though. I mean, certainly builds his resume.
I was covering Kapisa for my first and second army deployments in Afghanistan. It was pretty crazy. I got to write up the intelligence prep for a really big mission that like 5 or 6 teams did over there. So that was cool. But
is that when you guys bombed the hospital?
Oh,
no, that was in Kunduz.
Bring that up every time, man.
Can't be laid directly at my feet. Now that it was bad. But Kyle, back to your original point. You want to know the single biggest factor that allowed us to stay in Afghanistan for so long?
What does this do?
It was Iraq. Yeah. Iraq immediately overshadowed everything in Afghanistan. As a civilian, I heard absolutely nothing about Afghanistan post 2003 until we left Iraq. Until I was in AIT, and then my instructors were basically saying, Iraq's closing down, we're going to steady Afghanistan stuff now. So that essentially, with all of the attention on Iraq, Afghanistan, you're able to continue the war. You have a lot of money that's being circulated through these contracting companies. And once the well dried up in Iraq, they moved over to Afghanistan. And it seemed like every time we're over in Afghanistan, the whole goal is to avoid reminding the American people that we're there. Like that's the reason that Kunduz hospital bombing became such a big deal, is because it got covered by the news in the U.S. I think something like that wouldn't have become as huge a deal in the military as it was if people back home weren't hearing that we were still in Afghanistan, because that's something that every upper level group tried to avoid.
Yes, dude. It seems like, the media would have one yearly event, right? Like some one yearly Afghan tragedy to cover. And every year it seems like it just reminds us that we are in Afghanistan still. And but then I don't really think the public really cares, because the news cycle is so fast and furious now that, like, even a Kunduz hospital bombing, I mean, that's out of the news cycle in a few days, and then people are right back to caring about whatever the news wants you to care about, and it's never Afghanistan. I mean, that's for conspiratorial reasons, or it's for just it doesn't get clicks online. I don't know, but there's usually one tragedy per year that gets reported that kind of reminds people of what we're doing. So I mentioned earlier about the pipeline of these flag officers, that go straight into working for military contractors or defense contractors. It happens to pretty much everyone. So generally the pipeline is you go to West Point, you do your 20 or 30 or however many years until they basically have no way to fail you upward anymore, and then you get you a seat reserved on a board, or as a CEO, or some sort of C-suite position at a military contractor company. So, and that's always kind of been speaking on a very personal level, like that's always why I don't have any respect for these people. Like most of the time, you have people like Mattis, who garnered a ton of respect amongst troops when he was a Marine commander, and it's like, okay, I understand why they like him. I read the stories, and I understand why he would inspire men underneath him. But then he gets out, and what's the first thing he does? I mean, had he just gone home and, like, gone into politics or gone and written books or something, yeah, sure, whatever. He's seen the horrors of war. Why perpetuate it? But that's not what he does. He gets out and he goes and gets a board seat at General Dynamics, and whether it's Raytheon or General Dynamics or Lockheed Martin, I mean, you can't turn around without bumping into a 3 or 4 star general there. And it's and when you're guaranteed a position to make millions of dollars or all these stock options, why would you ever want to stop the gravy train?
I will say that there are also some good guys out there. Admiral McCraven comes to mind. Former.
You just say that because he was the chancellor at UT.
Well, I mean that's a fact that he went in on to be the chancellor of a public school, and I think there's a lot of stuff to admire about that. And I'm not sure what
I'm not saying they don't all do it.
Oh, certainly,
but a good chunk of them.
But yeah, just wanted to go ahead and provide a little bit of a counter, like, hey, Kyle, bring a little bit of balance.
Oh, sorry. Did I go a little too cynical there? I'm sorry. I'll dial it back a little bit.
No, you don't have to respect any of them, Kyle.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, no.
But no, that is something. When you look at, we were talking during the break. There's I think it's a clip from John Oliver's show where it's a little 1 second splice of every theater commander in Afghanistan all saying we're making progress, and it's very hard to not be cynical when you think, what if they're all just saying this to perpetuate the war, to get onto a board, to make 7 figures advising while doing very little work, like saying, oh yeah, well, we can help fund your F-35 project, or we can help fund your Intel analyst project, the one that we were all on. Like it becomes very easy to fall into that mindset where these generals don't actually care about the outcome, and it's at the end of the day all about lining their pockets. The same idea that we hold when we talk about our politicians.
Um, so there is a book out there called Strategy Strikes Back: How Star Wars Explains Modern Military Conflict. And it's a series of essays from, anywhere from field grade to flag grade, primarily officers. And they use the lens of Star Wars to draw comparisons to, our modern day military in the United States. And one of the essays that stood out to me most is called "The Jedi and the Senate." And in this, the author, let's see, it's Jim Golby, discusses how the Jedi created a warrior caste in which they said, "Hey, we know what's best here. Don't worry, Senate. We have your best interests in mind," and started running crazy operations everywhere, uh, creating clone armies. You know, assassinating people in some instances, depending on where you stand on the conflict. Um, and that was a really great essay. It kind of opened my eyes to, like, yeah, we're kind of creating a warrior caste in many ways, with kind of the weird hero worship that occurs, the stand for the national anthem things in a few ways. But certainly, to Kyle's point, and Stu, I think, was just talking about it as well. Yeah, our generals maybe are sometimes saying, like, "Hey, who's the guy that's been doing war for the last 30 years? Don't worry, Congressman, I got this." Um,
Yeah.
the Taliban are facing defeat in the face.
And there's an Atlantic article on the same topic about about a warrior caste system in America, and it's interesting because it's the exact same thing you talked about in that essay, that we basically, it's the same generations of people. Like, oh, my dad was in the army and his dad was in the army. It's very rare that somebody, yeah, like Zach, for instance, yeah, but it's like,
And my mom.
it's rare that. And your mom, it's crazy, yeah. I mean, it's the same families fighting the wars at least since like the 1970s and 80s, and it's like, we've created that, and that also helps prolong these conflicts, because if it was everybody's son signing up to go fight these wars, it would be different. But if it's the same families that all kind of hang out in the same communities, it kind of segregates this war fighting caste, from the general on down to the private. It segregates them away from the rest of the population, and then all of their burdens and stuff are kind of carried within that caste system.
Kyle, how dare you speak ill of the troops by disagreeing with them and what they're doing for you?
I wasn't true. I can disagree with them.
So that's a great point, right? And to kind of bring it back on topic, because we're a little all over the place this episode, but I don't care. We're having fun. Looking at the Afghanistan papers, and that reminded me, before we did the first episode, I read the most recent cigar report, and there was a lessons learned about a contract that was put out for some Italian company to help with upkeep of A-29 fighter planes, which fighter is a stretch. It's a pretty obsolete aircraft, but it'll work for the Afghan Air Force. And it was a $550 million contract. And they found out, and this was in 2012, 2013, they later found out that the planes barely existed, right? They weren't operable. They were missing parts. None of it actually worked out and made any sense. And they found that there was a retired Air Force general who was working as like the middleman between this defense company and the U.S. government. And there's all this evidence that, okay, yep, he pretty much lied to get his buddies some money, and I'm sure he got a cut of that $549 million. And the cigar report said, there's not enough to really like charge him with anything. And so that was it. Like there was never any accountability for, we just lost $500 million on a program that we deemed to be important that turned out to apparently not be all that important.
And there's never accountability at those levels because they're all buddies. Like all of the decision makers and all of the people that are involved in some of these programs, which end up being scams, DSIGs, and it's just self-perpetuating. There's this great movie based on a great book called The Pentagon Wars. It takes place, I think, in the late '80s, and stars Carrie Elways and Kelsey Grammer. In case anyone's interested, you can go on YouTube, and someone uploaded it on there for free, and no one caught it. But anyway, it's a great movie about the development of the Bradley fighting vehicle, which started out in the '60s and they were starting it with like a relatively good budget in the millions, developing this troop carrier. It ends up staying in development for 17 years, and the cost of development balloons up to $14 billion. And throughout the entire movie, Carrie Elway's character is like kind of a good guy. He's a colonel that's trying to figure this thing out and fix the issues that they're having with development. And Kelsey Grammer is the general that's in charge of the program. Naturally, he's got links to the people that are going to be developing it on the outside and actually building the things once they finish development. So he spends the entire movie basically stymieing the helpful guy, Carrie Elways, from being able to fix the issues. And at the very end, when he finally faces justice and gets fired from his position for wasting all our goddamn money, he ends up getting assigned to a board of directors and making millions anyway. And that's how it works in real life. Like, as crazy as it seems, it's something straight out of a Hollywood movie, but it's real. That kind of stuff happens all the time.
Let's go through the Lloyd Austin, current Secretary of Defense. He was at Raytheon before he became the Secretary of Defense. Like Kyle said, Secretary and General Mattis was at General Dynamics. Who else was at some of the greatest hits? I'm trying to pull some names up right now because I'm really curious now who all worked where before or after they lied to Congress about the success we were having.
I wonder where Nicholson
in
went.
Afghanistan.
I wonder where Nicholson went.
He retired, man.
Yeah, well, he retired from the military, but he probably went somewhere.
As far as I can tell, he hasn't done anything. He's living off that opium money from his wife.
If we hit anything, CIA, I'm very sorry.
I will
didn't
contend
mean it. It's a
happens.
joke. I don't mean to. Yeah, we don't know what he's doing.
Hey, what's Michael Flynn up to nowadays?
Oh, he's out peddling conspiracy theories. Apparently, we're going to have a new president in August.
Well,
Who knew?
Here we go.
Everyone's got to hustle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's funny that we compare the United States military to Star Wars because I would say I want to make a joke about being good in the 1970s and 80s and then devolving into just a giant money pit that doesn't produce anything good, but I can't find the joke there. I'm sure there's one somewhere.
It was I want to say that was Clinton era politics, economic policies, post Cold War. It just didn't make any sense to keep doing our own R&D in the DoD, especially for some of the more advanced projects. So I mean, we did the good old capitalism. Let's put out the highest bidder. Thing, and really just started.
Well, the lowest bidder.
Even further. Yeah. Let's get the lowest bidder with the highest number of board members at our golf club, and let's start developing these space age rockets more so than we already did in the 60s through the 80s. But that's my own concept.
So to provide an answer, General Dunford, who he worked for the Trump administration in some capacity. I can't remember which one it was. At least I think. No, he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Excuse me. He works for Lockheed. He's on their board. So there's one. Before him was John Allen, who I don't know if he worked for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Post-military career, he worked for Secretary of State Kerry. He worked kind of with the Obama administration regarding ISIS or ISIL. So he joined the Brookings Institute. Nothing too bad there, I guess.
Yeah, Brookings Institute. I mean, I'd support that.
Before him was General Petraeus, who he had all sorts of problems. I hope he's just kind of staying at home, not having any more affairs, releasing classified information.
Did any of you go through AIT with Bradley Manning?
No. I think Bradley Manning went through AIT like one or two cycles before me, I believe.
You must have been in a cycle right behind me, Zach. He went through with a couple of guys in one ID that I ripped out of Iraq with.
So I was there summer of 2008.
Oh, you were there a cycle ahead of me because I was fall of 2008.
Okay, so he was 2 ahead of you then.
Okay. Yeah, I met a lot of interesting people. Did you guys ever watch Restrepo?
Yes.
So Captain Kearney, I believe is his name. I went and worked with his unit when he was their battalion commander. I want to say it was 1st Geronimo, 505 or 505th Infantry Regiment. He was a really cool guy. Limited interaction. I met Pat Tillman's old platoon leader. That was his PL on the mission when he was killed, and that guy was also battalion commander, but one of the best military leaders I've ever seen, ever. Super awesome guy. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Udlow.
What year did Tillman? Was that 2007 when he died?
Sounds about right.
Because I want to say it's right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was just reading an article the other day because it was Memorial Day weekend.
2004.
Oh, geez. Okay. I remember I was reading an article over the long weekend, as our vice president would put it. Reading an article regarding Pat Tillman and his military service and kind of how he felt about it. You know, for those listening, he was killed by friendly fire while he was in Afghanistan. If the reports are true, and I'm not saying they're not, but they can't be verified, best I can tell, is he was highly skeptical of what was going on even then. And this is 2.5 years after the conflict started. And that, you know, to kind of bring it back to the topic at hand, when you looked at those Afghanistan papers and you see these interviews with these generals and these policymakers and these advisors, they're saying the same thing. I think one of the quotes was, you know, Iraq started, and then by 2004, we were just kind of like, what are we even doing in Afghanistan? And that's kind of I feel like that is the mindset that has persisted for the last 17 years. Because I know, you know, Mick, I know you've listened to the previous episodes. We talk about that, where it was there was a clear goal of maintaining security and peace and stability, and then at the end, you know, after that happened, you get, well, let's make sure the provincial capitals or the district capitals are okay, and then we start losing district capitals. Well, let's make sure the provincial capitals, like really, like from 2004 on, we start focusing on Iraq. We completely forget about what's going on in Afghanistan. All the while, the commanders in Afghanistan are telling us, oh, we're having great success. We have all these different programs to help with the population. We got infrastructure programs. We're going to build bridges. We're going to put girls in school. And it turns out none of that shit really matters, because once we leave, all those girls' schools are going to go away. Those bridges will be utilized because people need bridges, but there's no actual concrete progress that we can look to here in June of 2021.
So I think you said something that, you said something that I found interesting, and it kind of sounds like our definition of victory changed. But I think I could make an argument that no one on this call really can articulate what victory looked like prior to maybe 2014, right? Maybe 2010. Certainly not in the first 9 years of the war. And that's part of the reason. Part of it is the war went on for so long. Afghanistan, I was watching movies and Hollywood movies about Afghanistan before I went for years. Who thinks that you're going to watch a movie about a war you're going to? It's like reading about the first crusade before you go fight the seventh. You know, but maybe not the best comparison.
They had movies.
You make a good point, though. I mean, who would have thought that we'd see movies about a war we'd go fight?
Yeah. So I probably, or I'd really love to hear the point of view from someone who was doing what we did back in 2004, in Kunar province, in Kabul, in Bagram. But you know what? By the time we got there, they were like, I'm sick of deploying for the 5th time. I'm going to go ahead and ETS and go work for Raytheon.
Well, I can't do that, but since we brought up movies about the war in Afghanistan, I have seen one in my life that's not a documentary.
12 Strong?
No, I had not seen 12. I did read Horse Soldiers, but I didn't watch 12 Strong. I was new to Kandahar, right? To the point that Colonel Eastman still called me Guy because he didn't know my name. I'd walk past him. He was like, "What's up, Guy?" I'm like, "Okay, cool. I work for that guy." I watched a movie called Hyena Road.
Yes.
And holy shit, that movie is so bad. That movie's so bad. They're like, they call him
I've
like
missed
some old
that one
Mujahideen
somehow.
fighter. They call him the Lion of the Lion of the Valley. I'm like, you just stole that from Ahmad Shah Massoud. You're just making shit up now. It was such a bad movie.
Man, I think something that's like hopefully crystallized for us over the past 60 years since Vietnam and our now second or I guess third prolonged conflict is that we're like America's very good at like going in salt earth and like defeating the enemy, but we like it's almost impossible to like hold an area and like change a culture enough to create a stable democracy, especially something that'll outlast us, staying there and spending our billions and thousands of lives on top of that.
It's almost like it's hard to build a country out of one that's already exists.
Yeah,
sort of.
Another country out of one that already exists. Yeah.
Out of 5 that exist.
And the Defense Department doesn't exist to build nations.
Yeah. Good point.
It exists to destroy them.
Just call it the Department of War again.
We should.
It makes way more
Department
sense.
of Peace.
Yeah.
Who was the person running that wanted the Department of Peace? That lady.
Marianne Williamson.
Marianne Williamson. Yeah.
Oh,
Don't blame me. I voted for Marianne.
I voted for Chippy Sinclair from Iron Eagle. Proud voter of Lou Gossett Jr.'s character from a fictional 1984 action movie.
Hey, Kyle.
Hey.
Do you have any strong opinions about the F-35?
Speaking of waste.
Do I? Hey, speaking of waste, what's waste? The F-35, in my opinion. Yeah, you were talking about that Bradley fighting vehicle movie. I've seen that movie. It's very good.
It's great.
But yeah, like the F-35 is that, but like to the X power. Like it's exponentially worse than the Bradley fighting vehicle. And what's funny is because I mean, I act like I'm like some sort of Top Gun aviator, and no, I did not. I just collected intelligence from a tiny little twin engine aircraft. But like, you talk about like the F-35 fighter jet, which was originally intended as a cheap aircraft to replace the aging fleet of F-16s. So that was its original scope, right? And then it slowly got feature creep added to it. So where it became basically just as expensive as like the F-22, which was like the Lamborghini of like of whatever three and a half generation, because the F-35 is like a 4th generation fighter jet. It's like the scope creep blows my mind how much stuff they added to it that they can't get working right. And then now they just said they're like, well, that kind of didn't work, so we still need a replacement for the F-16. We'll start looking at it. And it's like that's been in development like 30 years, man. It's wild, the waste.
VTOL, baby.
The what?
VTOL.
VTOL. Well, one of the F-35, the Marine F-35, is capable of VTOL. One of the other F-35s is capable of STOL, which is a short takeoff and landing, and then the other one is just like a conventional takeoff and landing. So it's like, why do we need it? Like, it's like 3 aircraft in one. It's giant.
I would like to say, if you're an F-16 pilot listening to this, go ahead and fuck yourself. You do not need to take with full afterburners all the time in Afghanistan.
But it's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool once. Do it for an air show. I've seen the intelligence. You're not at risk of being shot down. Departing Bagram airfield.
That's why I love working aviation.
But listen,
home by midnight.
Yeah, I love it. It never stopped being cool. It never stopped being cool.
I did want to point out the development of the M11 pistol. So for those, for our listeners, the Army, after retiring the M1911, the World War II era, maybe Spanish-American War era,
World War I era pistol.
Service pistol.
2 world wars,
in which we both won by leaps and bounds. The Army developed the M9, manufactured or developed by Beretta. And it was a standard service pistol for most
like
US
40, 50 years, wasn't it? I mean, it was part of that.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shot a NATO 9mm cartridge.
Solid pistol.
All pretty
a
reliable.
little heavy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, which one did Plucker leave in the bathroom?
M9.
It was-
Oh my
it was
god, I
M9.
forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh my god.
That was hilarious.
I'm gonna have
Yeah.
a heart attack. So at one point, the Army said, you know what, we did a next generation pistol. And I really don't know how much this program cost to do it, but they ended up settling on a pistol developed by Sig Sauer with like a hard plastic handle and a cool upper. It's like a knockoff Glock, but pretty decent apparently. But it's called the M11. But my whole point with this is being assigned to your standard run-of-the-mill, you know, regular units. The first unit I saw with it in theater was 101st Airborne Division, and you know, I realized like the people who actually use their pistols in combat just get Glocks. And it's it's the special forces and it's the special operations teams. And you know, why did we spend so much money redeveloping a pistol that is only going to get lost, and the only time it's going to be shot is on a range or at a clearing barrel in front of a chow hall?
When you could have just got a Glock 19 like the special forces have.
Or you could have just kept the aging M9 fleet.
Yeah, that nobody uses.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that was the point I wanted to make. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to my TED Talk. Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Boardwalk. A little lighter this time. We all had a great time recording it. I hope y'all had a good time listening to it. You know, as lighthearted as we can be about some of this stuff, it's it's your tax dollars that ultimately fund all of this, cronyism and fraud, waste, and abuse. So that's kind of the message we want to get out there. That and government don't work. But like to thank you all for joining us. Please check out our Instagram. It's at the Boardwalk Podcast. Share it with your friends if you have anyone else that you think might be interested in it. We'd love to have more viewers. We're really grateful for the ones we have already. We're having a blast doing this. So thanks, guys. If you guys have any like thoughts or comments or questions about the episodes, or maybe something that you're interested in having us talk about, leave a comment on our Instagram. We leave posts for every episode and sometimes in between. So we definitely love to hear from our listeners and get that feedback. But y'all, thank you so much for joining us. Have another great week. Signing out.